Welcome to Two Witness Teaching Program. Two Witness, a Bible teaching program to change and transform people. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Let's dive into it.
Reject the truth voluntarily to justify their lifestyle. They don't want to acknowledge God. They don't want to retain Him in their knowledge. Professing to be wise, they become fools. Unfortunately, these professors are teaching the children. Point G, nature and plant and animal life is clothed with exquisite beauty, color, schemes, and harmony. Gorgeous colors and designs characterize the plants, leaves, and flowers. The tiniest creatures and plants are adorned with beauty when viewed under a microscope. Look at the snowflakes. Every one of them is unique, different design. Yet in one snowfall, there might be trillions of snowflakes. Yet they all basically are six-sided. Yet they're all different. So point 4, our minds are driven to a firm conclusion if allowed to function unrestrained. That there must be a creator, designer who brought forth all these profound wonders into existence and sustains them by His divine power. Now, once this realization comes to his mind, that there is a God, and that this God is immensely great beyond any human description or superlative that we could come up with to describe Him. That God is vast beyond any dimension that we could arrive at. And in comparison with that, we're down here. There comes upon his heart an obligation to honor Him, to reverence Him, to worship Him. An obligation. Do you notice how that when you and I come into the presence of someone that has greater skills or abilities than what we have in a certain area, do you notice how there's something deep within you that respects that? You notice that? It's not just something unique with me then, right? That when you come into the presence of someone who is very skilled at what they're doing, don't you respect them? You know, somebody that can cook, like Doris. Because I have a hard time boiling water. I respect that characteristic. Somebody that can sit down at the computer and type 200 words a minute. Now, Karen can do 100 plus, but if she comes across somebody that can type 200, 250 words a minute, with some of the world champions, they're way up there, we'd respect them, right? Let's turn back to Romans again. Romans chapter 1, our text. Romans 1 verse 20 and following. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power, and His divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks. Now, can you begin to realize what a tremendous sin that is? To recognize the greatness of God in your own smallness and refuse to honor Him. The grossest of crimes. Even though they knew God, they did not honor Him or give thanks. They became futile in their speculations. Talk about leaps of faith. The foolish heart was darkened, professing to be wise. They became fools. They exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and of four-footed animals and crawling creatures. They exchanged the glory of God. Instead of worshiping and serving this great, wonderful God that we have, they serve the creature, serve themselves. They're saying, God, I don't care if you are that great. I'm going to serve myself rather than serve you. Professing to be wise, they became fools. So what do we learn about God from our natural observations? We're the South Sea Islander, the typhoon comes in, destroys our little hut, and everything else that we made washes over the island, flattens it. You're confronted with the force that's more powerful than you are. You're confronted with the power of God. And when the waves, surf comes crashing in, when you see the shark thrash the dolphin, you're confronted with this awesome power. And the idea comes to the mind that this Creator that created this life, He is all powerful. As far as our concepts can go, He must be all powerful. Because who could create the sun? Who could create the stars? When He can't create anything except to take the material that's already there and change it from one form to another. Where did it come from originally? His mind is driven to the conclusion that there's a Creator. And one of the characteristics of this Creator is that He is all powerful. And since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they're without excuse. So just by natural observations, we see that God must be all powerful, as far as our concepts can go. But He has to be all powerful. There's this one who created the sun must have more power than the sun. That the one who created the Milky Way is 100 billion stars in the universe with its 100 billion galaxies or more is greater than that. He's greater than the product of all that He's created. And that He created it and He didn't expend any thing that had to be replenished in it. You can do it over again a million times if you wanted to. He's all powerful. Our minds are driven to that conclusion. Then we see the intricacy, the harmony, the order around us. This example of the monarch butterfly. We just wag our heads and say, how can that knowledge be transmitted? The one who created that must be all-knowing as far as we can tell. This God must be a God of tremendous wisdom, as we see the order and the harmony and how things fit together, the ecology of everything, the life cycles. No matter what discipline of science you want to look at, you're confronted with order and harmony. And so we're drawn to the conclusion that our God must be wise. Or that wisdom is one of His tremendous attributes. We see the order in nature. Celia came up to me during the break and talked about when the U.S. sent man to the moon, the calculations had to be so precise about where the Earth is and where the moon is, because they're both moving at tremendous rates of speed. It's like you guys going duck hunting, and the duck flies up and you have to lead the duck a little bit. You have to swing your shotgun ahead so that when you finally squeeze the trigger and the shotgun bullets get there, that he's going to run into them. So you have to lead it, because if you aim right at the duck, he's flying and you're swinging, you're going to miss. And same way with getting a man on the moon. The Earth is moving and the moon is moving at great rates of speed. And that had to be calculated precisely. Hilliard told me if they would have missed the angle just slightly, one way or another, they would have missed the moon, bounced off into space, and still be going. But what does that show us? It shows us that there's order in nature. I mean, we see regularity. You see cycles. You see springtime and harvest. You see the seasons. You see the rainfall replenishing the earth. And this tells us that God is faithful. We can tell that this Creator, just by looking around us, that one of His characteristics is that He must be a faithful Creator. Because all around us we see His faithfulness. Like it says in Lamentation, great is His faithfulness. Morning by morning His mercies we see. The faithfulness of God, in that we can be guaranteed that tomorrow morning the sun is going to come out. Or the earth is going to rotate around, however you want to say it, but you know, there's going to be light following this night that we're in. We can count on it. You know, we're not going to toss coins and really bet on the fact, is the sun going to come up tomorrow? It's a certainty. So we have regularity. We have faithfulness. That God is absolutely faithful in the discharge of His duties and responsibilities. Every need that we have, He's provided for. He's faithfully provided for us. He designed us with a need for food to replenish the energy of our bodies, provides food. Not only that, but an infinite variety of food. You get to the infinite variety when you go to China. We have a lot over here, but wait till you get to China. That's infinite variety over there. But see, we have the faithfulness. Every need that we have, God has provided a way where it will lawfully be met. So we're confronted with the idea that there's a Creator. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. He's wise beyond our comprehension. He's faithful in everything. Also, there's born in our minds the fact that He must be a spiritual being. That this Creator must be over and above the product of His creation. And so therefore He must be the spiritual being. He's not the sun, not the moon, not the stars. He's the creator of them. He's not identified with what He has created. I mean, that's not Him. The sun didn't create the earth. God created the earth. Therefore, this God must be an immaterial or spiritual being. And we look at our own personalities, and we recognize, if we think about how we are, we realize that we're a spiritual being. We just happen to live in a physical body. But we realize that the real me just simply lives inside of this shell. You know, because somebody can have their arm cut off, legs cut off, yet inside they're the same, even though they have missing parts. We met people with leprosy, you know, without their hands and arms, but inside they're the same, aren't they? So that gives rise to the idea that we're spiritual beings. So the conclusion rises in our mind that God must be a spirit. A spiritual being. Also, we realize when we think about ourselves that we can only be at one place at one time. Because we inhabit a physical body, it's impossible for us to be two places at once. But we would recognize that someone who's not limited in a physical body would have the capability, if he's a spiritual being, to have the ability to be everywhere at the same time. Because he's not limited to being in one place at one time. And so we would draw the conclusion that this Creator must also be omnipresent. And we look at our lives and we see we had a beginning, we're going to have an end. Our parents had a beginning, they're now lying in the grave. Mine are. And so the Creator of all these things, the one who gave life, must have life that never began. Our life began, and everybody else's life that you know about had a beginning. But the creator and the source of all this life must possess eternal life. We're drawn to the conclusion that God is not limited by time, or that he is eternal. So, before we've even picked up the Bible, we come to these conclusions about the nature of God. And once we come to these conclusions, what is our obligation? It's that we see God as this immensely big circle, and we see our own smallness in relation to his abilities, and there comes upon us at that moment an obligation to honor him, to respect him, to worship him, just to give him his due, just to worship him. So on your page 2, the emphatic result of all these observations is that all moral beings, in the right use of their facilities, there's others. There's me, there's you, and there's others. And I have an obligation to honor God once his natural attributes are clearly seen. That obligation is there. But I look this way, and I see you. And I know that God gave me life, and that God gave you life. And so, yeah, within nature itself, the foundation of the Ten Commandments of God. Because I could go through times flying by, you could go through and list every one of the Ten Commandments as being clearly seen through nature itself. The obligation. In the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we have to work to gain an income. And if I've labored diligently, put bread on the family table, you have no right to come in and steal my bread. And if you respect me, you wouldn't. If I respect you, I'm not going to steal anything that you have. And so the fact that we are in a relationship with God and see the greatness of God, there comes upon us an obligation to recognize his rights and to render him due honor. So when we see that we're in community with each other, there comes upon us an obligation to respect the rights of our fellow man. So the emphatic result of these observations that we acknowledge, respect God, we acknowledge and respect each other. But as we continue to look around in the world, we see things that we don't like. I mean, let's face it, we do. We don't like to see this violence in nature. We don't like to have the bacteria attack us. I didn't like it when I was attacked by a malaria parasite that was, multiplying within my body. There's some other parasites I picked up in India that were multiplying in my gut. I didn't like that. We see things that we don't like. We see inconsistencies. If God is this great and this good, why is there war? Why is there sorrow? Why is there agony? Why is nature even unfriendly at times? Why are these calamities where Mount St. Helens blows up? So something dreadfully is obviously gone wrong in moral relations. There must be a reason for this mixture of tragedy in the presence of amazing good. Someone must be responsible. If there had been a destructive rebellion by moral beings and the great moral governor has reacted in righteous moral responsibility, then we can look through the clouds of tragedy and find an intelligent basis of worship in full knowledge that God's loving purposes have been hindered by man. See, mankind is driven to the conclusion that, if God is this great, why are all these problems around me? Why is it so hard just to provide for my family? Why is it so hard just to eke out an existence and then be attacked by all of this stuff that's out there? See, these questions come up in the mind of the little guy in Africa and the little guy in Detroit and everywhere. See, these are universal questions. You know, who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? Our conscience, point C on page 2, our conscience affirms that we've been guilty of rebelling and continuing a moral revolution against our intelligence, of refusing to live our lives in absolute recognition of the divine being and the obvious rights of our fellow man. And of course, conscience is a function of our mind that compares what we know to what we do. And our conscience bothers us, the sinner. And he feels an unrest, he feels a tension within him, there's a realization that he's not living like he should. That he knows better. He knows better. He knows better than he's living. And the conscience cries out and says, you know better. You shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. Friends, that didn't evolve. Conscience is a gift from God. God has a conscience. Conscience was designed into mankind as something to be a source of great blessing. If you ever notice that when you do what's right, you go the second mile, how good you feel inside? That's your conscience. It's comparing what you know as to how you ought to live to what you're actually doing. So when you do the right thing, your conscience comes along, pats you on the back, and encourages you to keep doing it. You know, keep living that way. That's right. That's how you ought to live. So conscience is designed in mankind, and God has a conscience, because we're made in His image. Wants to know what the source and meaning of life is, and He knows there must be more to life than He is now experiencing. Wasn't that how you felt before you came to Jesus? Did you experience any of those things? Point number D. Our observations indicate the goodness, the intelligence, the wisdom, the greatness, and the energy of such a God would bring to man's understanding the reasons for the mixture of tragedy among unending great goodness. We would therefore expect that there be a Bible that would reveal inner secrets of the divine being and lead mankind into truth and measures of mercy. What we're saying is that once we understand that God is so intelligent, and He's so wise, and He's so good, the conclusion that we draw is that if He made us, and I'm confused about life, of why there's these problems, and this disorder, and this disease, and sickness, and poverty, and wars, wouldn't the intelligence and wisdom of God bring an explanation that would satisfy us? See, there's an expectation within the hearts of people that God would communicate and tell man what's going on. And so there's the expectation that God would, since He is all-intelligent, since He is a loving God, obviously, He would communicate with mankind. And so man expects a Bible. He expects that there to be a Bible. Get down to the remarks. The remarks that the impressions that we allow our natural observations to make upon our minds are in accordance with the response we're willing to make in adjusting our way of living. See, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And so if you, to say there is no God, you become a fool. And you have to blind your eyes to obvious truths. You can't just walk around and look and see and observe and think and not come to the realization that there's God. And so come back to our text. Professing to be wise, they became fools. They didn't honor Him as God and give thanks. They became futile in their speculations. The foolish heart was darkened, professing to be wise. They exchanged, they became fools. They exchanged the glory of God. They exchanged one thing for another. They exchanged the glory of God for the glory of man. And are living as total misfits against their design. Weren't designed to live that way. It's any wonder they have problems. Take a brand new SUV, one of these Mercedes vehicles, $75,000, brand new out of the factory. You know, I want to go to the seminar, but instead of coming up I-75, I'm going to take St. Clair River, the creek. You know, Rock Creek out here. You know, pull off into the creek, you know, just gun that engine, bang, you hit a rock, radiator cracks, just keep gunning it, hit another rock, goes through the oil pan, oil drains out, 5 minutes. You could wreck that $75,000 Mercedes. Just 5 minutes. Why? You violated its design. It's never designed to run down the creek under those conditions. It's designed to run on these decent roads, and it'll service you for many hundreds of thousands of miles and just take care of it. But if you violate its design, you can destroy it that quick. And man is not designed to live in sin. You have been designed for the throb of holiness. You've been designed by God to recognize the supremacy of God in your own smallness in comparison, and you're to recognize the fact that you're rubbing shoulders with other people who've been created by God too, and that their rights and happiness is just as important as yours. And every time you sin, you're violating either a relationship with your fellow man or a relationship with God, and God never designed you to live in sin. So the impressions that we allow our natural observations to have upon our mind are in accordance with the response you're willing to make in adjusting your way of living. In other words, you can't go around saying that there's the God and not honoring Him. If you recognize there's a God, you have to honor Him and serve Him. And the greater your God is to you, the greater the dimensions, you know, the more incumbent upon you it is to render Him honor and respect. So first, we do not allow ourselves to have a greater concept of God than we're willing to conform to. Dwell upon and think about the greatness of and character of God is to increase our sense of duty, but also the value of any experimental relationship that is offered through great measures of restoring our broken friendships. So the more we think about God, you know, the more of a joy and a privilege it is to serve Him. And secondly, we do not allow ourselves to have a greater concept of ourselves than we're willing to conform to. To consider ourselves as a product of the love and wisdom of God in the divine image and likeness is to establish the God image of personality which would impel us towards a life of true intelligence and honor. So if we recognize the greatness of man, man is great. We've been endowed with so much as a gift from God. I don't have a lot of homosexuality in my barnyard.
Telling the cows what.
You see, they act worse than animals. Worse than animals. Let me show you. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 4. Starting with verse 2 of Isaiah chapter 1. It says, "Listen, O heavens, and hear, O earth, for the Lord speaks. Sons I have reared and brought up, but they've revolted against me. An ox knows his owner. A donkey his master's crib. But Israel does not know. My people do not understand." It goes about how they've despised the Holy One of Israel. They turned away and they've gone backsliding. But he tells them, in plain English, he says, you're dumber than an ox. That's where the expression comes from. He says, you people, you are dumber than an ox. An ox at least knows his owner. The donkey knows his master's crib. He knows where to get fed. But he says, my people don't know as much as the ox. He says, you're dumber than an ox. I want to encourage you to learn to worship God in the little things in life. Take the time to look at the flower and say, Lord, this is wonderful. Look at the design of it. Take time to look at the sunset, to look at the coloring, the majesty of it. And God is so good, and He has made such an interesting world. Worship is not just Sunday morning when the bands are playing, we're raising our hands and dancing. It's also when you're viewing the sunset. It's also when you're looking at the flower. Learn to worship God in the little things in life. I just want to quote a few of their talks about chance. He says, evolutionary scientists have called just one chance in 10 to the 15th power a virtual impossibility. Notation, so I'm going to go back over that a little bit.
All right.
Scientific notation is just a way to express big numbers.
Don't take him out in stone here.
Yeah, we're going to make it simple. 1 million. 1 million. Expressed in scientific notation would be 10 to the 6th power.
So 10 times 6?
Well, the little number up here is you just add zeros. That's the number of zeros behind it.
Oh, so it's 10. 6 zeros.
Yeah, with 6 zeros. So you can just add.
Multiply by itself 6 times.
You know, you can just add zeros. So
10 times 6 would be that number. All right.
Right.
Okay.
No,
So
10 multiplied 6 times.
yeah. So a billion is going to be to the 9th, right?
So it would be 10 multiplied 9.
No, you simply add 9 zeros.
Okay.
So a million
All right. So
is,
that's a lot of numbers.
you know, you
That's a good one.
see, this is how you write, that'd be 10 million. But see, a million has 6 zeros. A billion would have 9 zeros. Trillion would have 12 zeros. And so every time you add another number, you're actually multiplying the number by 10. So 10 to the 10th power is 10 times more than 10 to the 9th power. Just like, okay, this is, let's say this is 10 million. We agree that this is 10 million?
Yeah, you got that?
Yeah,
Hey,
this is
I'm
10
all right with
million.
that. That's right.
Okay, we add one more zero, and what do we have? We have 100 million, right? So every time you add another zero, you're actually, it's 10 times greater than the number before that. And so, what I was saying last night, the scientists have said when you have a number 10 to the 50th power, that's totally impossible. They say that's absolutely, totally impossible. And then we talked about 10 to the 151st power. Well, they said that's the chances of, you know, if you take an amoeba and boil it down to its parts, and the chances that those parts could recombine back to the original amoeba is this. But they say that's impossible. You know, so that's
3 times impossible.
you know, 100 times. No, it's not 100 times, because 100 times would just be
3
power
impossible.
it's you know, it's just mind-boggling, because it's really hard to.
If 10 to the 50 is impossible, why would they even write 10 to the 152?
Well, they figure out the probability of these things, and so they say the chance for a human being to evolve through chance. You know, I forget the exact figure, but it was something like 10 with 10 to the trillionth power up here. In other words, it's, you know, it's so far beyond the realm of impossibility. It's,
Oh, I get it. So 50
you
is
can't even
possible,
express it mathematically, how possible it is.
Okay, so if 10 to the 50 is impossible, then
Anything beyond that is totally
way beyond
impossible.
impossible.
Yeah, that's all that they're saying. You know, like if you had one chance in a million to win the Michigan lottery, then another power would be one chance in 10 million. You know, the chances diminish, you know, very, very rapidly as the scientific notation number goes up. Anyway.
Thanks,
So that
Pete.
a little clearer?
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, that was just for Chad.
No problem.
Another little item I wanted to mention on just the things of nature and how everything in nature glorifies God and talks about the glory of God. I learned about this little bird in Australia called the incubator bird. Now, the male bird, to attract his mate, he makes a huge pile of green leaves, grass, any kind of green vegetation. He makes a compost pile. And of course, the bigger compost pile he attracts, that makes him more attractive to these female incubator birds. And so a mate, you know, finds him suitable, and they mate, and the female incubator bird lays her eggs in this compost pile, and then she leaves, never to be seen of again. Now this male of the species, the male incubator bird, he has to maintain that egg at a constant temperature of 91 degrees. If the temperature gets more than that by, I think it's 1 or 2 degrees, or less than that by 1 or 2 degrees, the embryo in the egg dies. So this fella's on duty 24 hours a day. And of course, the compost pile produces heat. He's not sitting on the egg. The egg is in the compost pile, but he has something in his beak, like a thermometer, that can measure temperature, and he knows exactly what 91 degrees is. And so in the nighttime, when it gets cold, he puts more compost on this egg. You know, so it's 91 degrees. In the daytime, when it's hot, it takes all the vegetation off, you know, so it's 91 degrees. And he's constantly monitoring that egg until the bird hatches. And then he leaves, and the fledgling is on its own. But I think that's so amazing. Now, how could a mechanism like that evolve? Because the bird would have to know exactly. In other words, there couldn't be any mutations or mistakes to come up with something like that. The first bird had to do it right, or the species couldn't continue. And there are so many examples like that in nature that just boggle the mind. You probably heard about the bombardier beetle. Bombardier beetle. It's a little beetle that, when its little enemies attack it, it's got this little tube on the end of it. He can just turn around and squirt them with stuff, and it's like an explosion. And he's got 2 chambers within his body. And different chemicals are separated by these 2 little chambers. But when they're mixed together, there's an explosion. There's an actual explosion of what happened in his body. It would just blow him right up. But bombardier beetle. Something attacks him, he just whips around and shoots him with this flaming hot, it's above boiling, and just zaps him like that. But yet, and again, in a laboratory, if you mix those 2 chemicals together in a flask, you've got a major explosion. And he carries them around in his body with 2 chambers. And how would that evolve? If he didn't get it quite right, he's gone. And so what we see in nature is the conclusions that we draw as we just look around with our eyes wide open is that God is all powerful, He is wise, His knowledge is vast beyond our comprehension, He's all knowing, He is all powerful, He's a spiritual being and has all of these characteristics and attributes. And so then when mankind recognizes that God is such a God as that, immediately when we come to that realization, we're under obligation to honor God, to put him on the pedestal, because he is certainly much greater than we are. And then of course we see our brothers, fellow man over here. He ought to honor and respect and love God as well, and we respect and love each other. So nature itself lays the foundation for man's obligation towards God and towards man. So that's why on the day of judgment, when God calls each one of us to account, we stand before him. There'll be no one that can give an excuse and say, well, I didn't have a King James Bible. All I have is the New American Standard. That will not be an excuse. There'll be no excuse, except if someone doesn't have the capacity to think. But anyone in the right use of their mind, there'll be absolutely no excuse. And so now we turn to the Bible. Nature lays our expectation that there would be a Bible. If there is a God who is supremely intelligent, who is a good God, as we see manifested in nature, we see the color schemes, the delicious food with such a variety of taste. We could have made it all bland or all one flavor. But, there's so much goodness that we see around us. So we know that a good God, an all-knowing God, a wise God, powerful God would have the capability of communicating with mankind and sharing with man. Why? Sharing with man answers to his basic questions. Because as we mentioned last night, the unconverted man, there's a sense of loneliness in his heart. Before he comes to the Lord, there's a sense that there's more to life than he's been experiencing up to that point, that there has to be more, that there has to be reasons why we see wars and tensions in families and calamities, natural calamities and things of that nature. So man expects that if there is a God, that he would be able to communicate these truths with mankind. So now we turn to the Bible and look at what the Bible tells us about our great God. And we're on this place in your outlines on the truth about the nature and character of God. So now we're going to look through these different natural attributes of God in detail. Open the Bible, read the scriptures, and share it together. And again, for most of the people in this room, you already know these things, so it's going to be a quick review. I'm on that page entitled The Truth About the Nature and Character of God. The proof text, Isaiah 45:5, I am the Lord and there is no other. Besides me there is no God. Isaiah 57:15, thus saith the high and exalted one who lives forever, whose name is holy. I dwell on a high and a holy place. It goes on to say also with those who are humble and of a contrite heart. 1 John 1:5, God is light, and in him there's no darkness at all. 1 John 4:8, God is love. The one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. For God is light, he is love, he is exalted. Now again, we can learn much about God's true nature, and I encourage each one of you to cultivate the practice of really observing things of nature and of the world God has created. And as I mentioned last night, I think I would encourage you to learn to worship God in the little things in life. To enjoy the little things in life. And as Bob Hawley and I were talking, just everything that happens, around us, nature gives us so many opportunities to fellowship I think that's one of the reasons God made such an infinite variety of things, so that as we can share them with others. He's telling me about the 5 deer he saw from his bedroom window. Looks this way, and here's these bucks, 5 bucks from his bedroom window. Well, that's something Bob and I can get excited about. And see, there's so many things like that. There's such infinite variety that it gives opportunities for us to fellowship with God. We say, Lord, you know, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. You made such an animal like that, they're so fleet. And we can fellowship with other. Bob and I get excited about 5 bucks he saw from his bedroom window. And so such a variety, and worship God in the little things. Do you know that he's made 10,000 varieties of eggs? There's 10,000 varieties of locusts. There's animal species that haven't even been discovered. They're discovering new things all the time, the more they look. They give opportunities for fellowship. And so we can learn a lot about God through nature. But there's one attribute about God that we don't learn through nature. Although we can see trinities in nature, we would not understand through nature itself that God exists as a trinity of spiritual personal beings. But we look at the Bible, and that's a biblical revelation. The Bible reveals that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 3 separate personalities that comprise the Godhead. Now, Bob, when we teach overseas, several controversial areas. One is foreknowledge, one is original sin. But believe it or not, we get a lot of controversy about the Trinity. Probably number 3, along with born sinful and foreknowledge. So let's go through this and try to understand what the Bible tells us about the nature of God. So we look in the Old Testament, we see a plurality of personalities. The very name of God, for example, is Elohim. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The word God himself is the plural word in the Hebrew. And then Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image. Let us make man. Who's he talking to? He's talking to the angels. Is this conversation with the angels? No, it's a conversation taking place between the members of the Godhead. It was a decision that God was making. Let us make man in our image. He didn't make man in the image of angels or the image of demons or anything else. We're made in the image of God. And so in Genesis 1:26, where he says, let us make man in our image, we see these plural nouns and pronouns being used. Let's turn to Isaiah 6, verse 8. Verse 8, this is when Isaiah received this tremendous revelation of God. Verse 8 says, then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then I said, here am I, send me. This is the revelation of God to Isaiah, and the voice of God says, who shall I send? Who will go for us? He didn't say who will go for me. So again, an indication of plurality of persons, more than one person in the Trinity. And I think another indication is in verse 3 of the same chapter, where it says, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. I believe this is a recognition, ascribing holiness to the Father, ascribing holiness to the Son, ascribing holiness